The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, and welcome to today's webinar, Attracting and Retaining Talent, presented by our sponsor, Heffernan. We're so happy you can join us. My name is Deb Beto, and I will be your moderator today and be monitoring questions you may have during the session. Before we open up the session, let's review a couple of key items. All of the webinar materials we discuss can be found at the URL currently showing on your screen. I will be sharing this URL in a follow-up email, so don't feel like you need to write it down right now. If you have trouble with your internet connection during the webinar, we recommend leaving the presentation and logging back in. If you have audio difficulties or a telephone line goes dead during the call, hang up and call back again to the same number. If all lines go dead, watch the on-screen chat box for an alternative call-in number. Please feel free to ask questions or provide feedback by using the chat box or questions box during the webinar. If you are using a tablet, you may need to tap on the screen for the options bar to appear, and then you can select the appropriate option. We may not respond immediately, but we will work your questions or feedback into the presentation. If we can't get to your comment or question during the session, we will be online afterwards to respond, or we may follow up in an email if we run completely out of time. You may also email us at moderator@aspenrmg.com for up to 48 hours after the webinar. This will be a 1-hour presentation. Questions and comments are very much encouraged throughout, and the presenter will be answering questions at the end. And lastly, we have a number of webinars upcoming covering a variety of topics, including those listed at the Heffernan webinar website. In addition, we offer the mandatory Preventing Harassment training in English 3 times a year. With that, let's begin today's webinar, Attracting and Retaining Talent. Our presenter today is Nicole Osborne. Nicole Osborne is an MBA SPHR and is the owner of Synergize HR Consulting. As a private consultant, she works with small to mid-sized businesses and local government as a strategic partner in matters of performance management, training and development, leave management, Americans with Disabilities Act, interactive process, equal employment opportunities, and safety. In addition, she works with individuals as a job coach and expert resume writer. Throughout her career, she has provided strategic direction, thought leadership, and championed the development of initiatives to recognize and retain top talent. Welcome, Nicole. We look forward to your presentation.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. I'm so glad that you're able to join us here today for this presentation on attracting and retaining top talent. So before we get started, I just have to go over this content disclaimer that nothing in this presentation is intended to be a consulting or advice relationship with you. This is for information purposes only. Today, we're going to go through these following items. We're going to talk about what top talent is. We're going to discuss the difference between your high performers and your high potentials. We'll talk about why top talent is important, how to attract and retain them, and how to develop them, and where your pitfalls are. And then we'll have time for any questions that you may have at the end. But feel free to use that chat box in the meantime so that your questions are recorded and we can answer them. So our first thing we're going to start with today is we want to know how you're doing with your company to attract the best people and get them to stay once they're hired.
All right, so let's launch our polling question. Oh my goodness. Here we go. My company knows how to attract the best people and get them to stay once they're hired. So your answer is either going to be true, we've got it all figured out, false, we've got it all wrong. Maybe sometimes we get good people, but they leave, and I don't know. And while you're answering that question, just a reminder that this session is being recorded, and we will be sending information after the presentation today for how to access all of the webinar materials on our website. Let's see, I like to make sure that about 75 to 80% of the people have voted. And once I want to make sure that everybody's participating, so that's why we kind of wait for these polling. So if you haven't voted yet, make sure that you do that so that we can get back to the presentation. And let's see, we've got, Nicole, we have 5% say true, 2% say false, 76% say maybe, and 17% say I don't know.
Well, that seems to be representative with most employers, so you're in good company, everyone. You know, sometimes we do get good people, but sometimes it's a challenge to retain them if we don't understand their motivations and what drives them. So that's some of the things we're going to be addressing today. So what is top talent? The answer to what top talent represents is subjective, but when you probably know when you see it. When top talent is in action, most people have no trouble recognizing it. Your most talented employees are the most knowledgeable and skilled in their area of expertise, but will dig deeper to help the organization increase its competitive edge. They are the resourceful, committed, analytical, and they have the special something that we can't really quantitatively measure. The French call it the je ne sais quoi. I don't know how to describe it, but it's appealing and it's there. Part of that is attitude, work ethic, and cultural fit. You can learn a lot about candidates outside of the interview itself. For instance, how did they treat the receptionist or the first person that they encountered? How did you and the team feel after the candidate left? Were there any moments of levity when the candidate and the team connected? Did the candidate appear comfortable with the team and the environment, or were there moments of awkward silence? By looking at candidates in a different way, you may end up abandoning the perfect person on paper in favor of the connection you're able to make with a candidate. Maybe they have admirable traits that go beyond technical expertise, such as grit, determination, and get up and go. One thing is for certain, top talent never says it's not my job. They intuitively know the appropriate time to step up or step back, how to embrace others' better ideas, offer creative solutions, and have integrity. Bill Gates once said, "Take my 20 best people, and virtually overnight, Microsoft becomes a mediocre company." The problem of losing top talent is nothing new. In the not so distant past, an organization's workforce was spread relatively even among a normal bell curve, mitigating the reliance on the high performer. However, today, the left 1/3 of the curve is gone. It has been outsourced, right-sized, and offshored. The job functions that remain have been piled onto others. Other tasks and the people that man them simply aren't coming back. Reliance on top talent to carry the bulk of the organizational load has never been greater. So when your top talent leaves, it's going to hurt. Whatever initiatives they've been driving get parked or farmed off to someone who isn't ready to tackle that challenge. The company is left scrambling to update a job description that can encapsulate all the things that the person was doing. A burden is placed on the recruiter to try to quickly fill the gap, and sometimes client relationships are damaged in the process. Studies by United Insurance Services estimate that it costs 6 to 9 times a person's monthly salary on average for exempt employees. For a manager making $60K a year, that's $30,000 to $45,000 in recruiting and training expenses. Another study by the Center for American Progress found that it costs up to 213% of the annual salary for highly educated executive positions. For example, the cost to replace a $100,000 a year CFO could be up to $213,000. The real cost of employee turnover is usually an unknown because most companies don't have systems in place to track exit costs, including recruiting, interviewing, hiring, orientation, training, and administrative costs. Then you factor in the quantitative costs such as lost in productivity, lost business, decrease in morale, and cultural impact. You may never know the exact number, but I'll bet no one can argue with the fact that it is a lot. Let's take a deeper dive into what top talent is. We can basically separate our top talent into two buckets, our high performers and our high potentials. Sitting in our offices, these two may look pretty much the same. They both take pride in their work and are high learners and performers who can deliver a lot of value to an organization. But high potentials tend to be broad and adaptable in their learning skills, while high performers have narrow but deep expertise in their subject matter. Be careful not to confuse your high potentials with your high performers. This is a risk, especially in organizations that tend to put a premium on technical skills. Technical skills are necessary, and the workforce needs high performers. However, when we look at succession planning and selecting future leaders, the candidate with the most technical knowledge may not have the skills required to effectively lead people. Many employees don't have any desire to lead people and are perfectly happy doing the technical work and being an exceptional individual contributor. However, if we don't have enough potential leaders to step forward, the company may be left with a gap through attrition. For a company to maintain their competitive edge in their industry, they should recruit high potential employees. In a world of unlimited resources, organizations would surely invest in everyone. After all, as Henry Ford is credited as saying, the only thing worse than training your employees and having them leave is not training them and having them stay. In the real world, however, limited budgets force organizations to be much more selective, which explains the growing interest in high potential identification. An employee's potential sets the upper limits of his or her development range. The more potential they have, the quicker and cheaper it is to develop them. Scientific studies have long suggested that investing in the right people will maximize organizations' returns. In line with Pareto's principle, studies show that across a wide range of tasks, industries, and organizations, a small proportion of the workforce tends to drive a large proportion of the organization results, such that the top 1% accounts for 10% of the organizational output. The top 5% accounts for 25% of the organizational output, and the top 20% accounts for 80% of the organizational output. It is also noteworthy that talented employees are force multipliers, raising the performance bar for their colleagues, and particularly for their direct reports. They model and teach winning behaviors that shape high-performing cultures. Simply adding a star performer to a team boosts the effectiveness of the other team members by 5 to 15%. No wonder then that so many studies show stronger financial performance in companies that make proportionally greater investments in identifying and developing top talent. If we're going to invest in the right employees, the key question concerns who they actually are. This begs the question of what highly talented people are like. In other words, what are the indicators that signal star potential? So one thing we want to look at is proactive versus reactive. One of the most obvious traits of an employee with the potential to succeed in a leadership role is whether they take on proactive or reactive approach to problem solving. A proactive employee plans for the future. They don't wait until a crisis occurs to react. Reactive employees, on the other hand, wait until the very last moment a problem arises to come up with a solution, hence being referred to as firefighters. While both approaches aim to solve the problem, the proactive approach is more effective and telling of future leaders. Freedom from firefighting gives our employees and leaders more time to implement the prepared strategies and processes to address the issue. Then you look for leaders versus followers. Not every employee strives to climb the corporate ladder, and that's fine. After all, behind every successful leader is a team of high performers. Instead of looking for obvious candidates for leadership based on performance alone, take individual contributors' personality traits into consideration. High potential employees are often characterized by their ability to go above and beyond the call of duty. They don't leave the office the second the clock strikes 5. They don't focus on me, myself, and I, but the team as a whole. They look for opportunities to contribute their skills and demonstrate their leadership abilities. They're receptive versus unreceptive to feedback. Anyone can shake their head yes when receiving constructive criticism. but it takes a high potential employee to take that feedback, remember it, and apply it. Employees who are truly receptive to feedback will take immediate action, not to save their own skin, but to become an all-around better worker. During performance check-ins, discuss feedback with employees and identify areas where that feedback was successfully applied. Employees with high potential will avoid making the same mistake twice. Whoops, that jumped on me. Okay, and then finally, they are knowing the business versus knowing the job. In the end, it comes down to knowing the business versus knowing the job. High performers and high potentials both strive to reach peak performance, but high potential talent aims above that peak. Rather than just doing what they need to succeed in their individual roles, high potential employees take the entire business into account. They can clearly see how their work contributes to the overall success and set out to achieve the company vision through achieving their individual work goals. Whereas high performers seek to do well as individuals, high potentials desire to do well as a company. Recruiting for high potentials is different. It is an investment a company makes in themselves to commit to generating channels besides job posting. It's about having a great place to work, then using creative ways to let others know about it and create a buzz. Just like there is a difference between high performers and high potentials, there's also a difference between having a great place to work and having a place people want to. You may offer the premium benefits package, above market pay, and other perks, but if you don't have a culture that appeals to high potential employees, you won't attract them, and if you do, they won't stay. High potential employees are rarely unemployed. However, they may be persuaded by career moves. Gone are the days when an employee devotes their entire life to one company. High potentials jump when they need to and aren't afraid to leave for greener pastures that are in better line with their career trajectory. So how do you reach them if they aren't really looking? We all know how much data social media collects about people. I'm sure you've experienced a time when you merely thought about something and it popped up in your news feed. How do they do this? Algorithms. You find the right demographics and you not only reach more people, you increase engagement and conversation. This works for sales and it also works for jobs. You can create a Pinterest page that showcases your employees, your customers, your workspaces, events, etc. If your brand is exciting, people will follow your page. Using the 80-20 rule, 80% of your posts should be about things that add value to your followers, and 20% can be used for your job postings and company perks. Since the pandemic came into play, there are all sorts of new hashtags to follow, such as open to work and open to hire. By following hashtags, you can reach both active and passive candidates. Employee incentive programs are a great way to bring in new talent. Employees will be careful to pre-screen the referrals. If they get rewarded at several different intervals, like 30 days, 90 days, and then 1 year. Do you have an amazing workspace? What better way to show it off than with an open house? This could be monthly, quarterly, or yearly, but if people start to see your high-tech setup or your fancy game room, people will start talking. Job fairs are great when you're looking for recent grads, entry-level grads, or other targeted markets. However, you may get more bang for your buck by attending networking events for recruiters, or regularly attending your local SHRM events. Through my career, I've regularly collaborated with other recruiters who have been able to send me referrals to candidates in their pipeline that they can't place. Encourage current employees to talk about the company culture and create your own company hashtag that you can follow the conversation. Use your company's social media to tell long-term employee stories or highlight employees' recent successes. High potentials look for personal and career development. Having a leadership program or mentoring program or other development opportunities can be attractive to high potential candidates. You may be thinking that only a recruiter can create an impression on the applicants, but the fact is word of mouth may spread through the applicants as well, who would go ahead and share their bad experiences. It's not uncommon for colleagues to compete for the same position if it is seen as a growth opportunity, and believe me, they talk throughout the process. Thanks to the internet, both current employees and candidates can freely share their good and bad experiences with the world. Therefore, if the communication of a company is poor during the application process, interviewer was rude, or the candidate got ghosted, it may end up creating impressions within seconds. It is there freely available to anyone to read by someone who may have planned to apply with your company. We'll talk more about candidate experience in just a second. Unhappy employees are likely to tell potential employees or candidates about the bad things about the company or post a negative comment online. So allow your employees a chance to provide you with that feedback instead. Then you must act on their concerns. Why is this important? The answer is right there. Most people don't want to work somewhere that has a bad reputation, and if they do accept a position, they will only be looking at it as temporary until something better comes along. What's the most important word here? Yes, it is all. You get a lot of applications and resumes, I'm sure of it. You see a lot of the good, the bad, and the ugly, I'm sure of that. But what do your candidates see about you? How long does it take to apply to your company? Are you one of those ones that require a candidate to submit a resume and then complete an application that takes an hour to populate all the fields with the information from their resume? Would you apply to your own company? Are you a company that overzealously screens every applicant to build the pipeline but never gets back to any of the candidates to let them know why you put them on the back burner? You communicate what the process is to employees so they know where they stand in the process. A recent Glassdoor article quotes that 72% of candidates share their negative experiences online. If the company does not ask the right questions and act upon them, these bad reviews pile up. Ignoring candidate experience feedback can be costly. 42% of people would not buy the company's product if they had a bad candidate experience. Positive experiences matter. A LinkedIn report shows that 87% of applicants change their mind about a company after they look at the online reviews. Your reputation is everything, but what does that mean in the context of being an employer in a competitive job market? It means prioritizing the special sauce that is your employer brand. Your employer brand should tell candidates why they should want to work for you. What makes your company culture so appetizing? Why do your employees want to come to work every day? What do they look forward to? What benefits do they enjoy? For example, you might find out that employees like your company facilitate a collaborative work environment, or that they love your community involvement team activities. As you answer these questions, you're beginning to build your employer brand and making your company a more attractive place to work. Your company culture should attract the employees you want, while repelling those that don't fit in your culture. While the bones of it should be a reflection of the company's mission, vision, and values, it's the real experiences of your employees that are the meat and potatoes of your culture. Use employee surveys to take the temperature of your company culture and make sure it's meeting your standards. Employee feedback can help ensure your culture isn't half-baked. When you feel confident that you know and understand what sets your company apart, entice job candidates by sharing the secret ingredients of your culture as you interview. For instance, if your company places emphasis on corporate responsibility, you might ask a question that lends itself to the topic so you can integrate it naturally into the conversation. You could ask, how do you make a difference in your community? You could follow up your response with details about how your company gives back. By offering these vibrant details, you can create a competitive edge in the job market as you look to fill vacant positions. Top talent wants more than just a good place to work. They also are seeking benefits that are comparable or better than to what they're receiving in their current role. This includes things like health, life, disability insurance, retirement savings plans, and paid time off. If you're a smaller company, you may think you can't compete with big company benefits. However, there are many perks you can offer that bigger companies don't. For example, do you allow flexible work schedules or telecommuting? Do you offer on-site snacks in your break room? Do you have a job shadowing program that can help employees expand their skills? With a great employer brand, company culture, and employee benefits, you can think it'd be a piece of cake finding new talent. But the truth is that finding good people will still take work. Luckily, you can look to your current workforce for assistance. You won't find better ambassadors for your company than your own employees. but you'll need to guide them to ensure that they're accurately communicating the best attributes of your brand. To become ambassadors, your employees must be engaged in your business with a commitment to your mission, vision, and values. They should easily be able to describe your culture. They should know how to pepper in the perks of their job. With some of the basic training in these areas, you can easily empower your employees to become your brand ambassadors and recruit talent from their own networks. For example, you might have a training session for your employees where you go over company talking points and how to create and manage a LinkedIn presence. Social media offers a great avenue for employees to instantly reach candidates you wouldn't have access to otherwise. You wouldn't expect someone to eat at a restaurant with a bad review. Why would you expect someone to work for an employer with negative ratings? Candidates today have access to a vast amount of online information in your company before you even step in the door for the interview. You may want to make sure that this information reflects as positively as possible on your company. Also consider setting up Google Alerts to keep tabs on how your brand is represented online. Every time your company name is mentioned online, Google will send you an email alert. Additionally, keep an eye on social media sites. There are a variety of social monitoring tools available that allow you to follow mentions of your brand. There are 3 things you should be pre-screening for before a candidate progresses through the hiring process. That is ambition, ability, and commitment. We need to focus on these 3 things to determine the difference between high performers and high potential. As the saying goes, if you don't ask the right questions, you won't get the right answers. Let's look at some sample questions that will help you assess your candidate's potential. We need to understand the candidate's ambition. I'm not talking about the cliche interview question, where do you see yourself in 5 years? There's never been a worse question to ask in the middle of a global pandemic. I think it's safe to say whatever our answers were 5 years ago aren't true today. The best indicator of future ambition is past ambition. Ask the candidate to talk about why they've made job changes in the past. What motivated them to make a change? If you aren't going to be able to deliver what the candidate is looking for, it's best that you are honest. What are their personal and professional goals? That's important. But what is more important is what they're actually doing to achieve these goals. If the person has a goal, they also need to have a plan. Who do they admire and why? Chances are the things they admired about their previous leaders are what they will expect from a leader in their working environment, in their ideal working environment. What's their dream job like? If they want to work for an industry leader and your company lags the market, will that be a good fit? Finally, we need to know if the candidate is adaptable and open to new ways of doing things. If they can't describe a time when they've changed their mind, you may want to move on to a candidate that will be more receptive to blend into your culture. Next, we want to assess their ability. Again, past accomplishments are a great way to determine the candidate's ability to lead through a change in a dynamic work environment. I've seen a lot of resumes where candidates list their duties of their position and not much else. Their job title and duties are not going to tell you if they were actually successful in that position. Ask the candidate about times they've stood up for something they believed in, what problems they've solved, and what steps they took to move important initiatives forward. Ask them what they have done to wow their past employers. If their previous employers have gotten a return on their investment, you probably will too. Finally, we need to assess for commitment. What makes this person tick? This is part of the retention secret sauce. Getting a high potential candidate to walk through the door is only the beginning. You know when a candidate has done their homework. They drop their industry knowledge and what they know about your company throughout the interview process. They ask questions about the company. The interview process is a two-way street. High potential candidates are also interviewing the company. I've recruited for companies who don't want to honor any more than 2 weeks notice for the candidate to begin. But what does that say about a candidate if they need 3 to 4 weeks so that they can finish a project, which is a commitment, for their employer before they move on? To me, it says that they are going to need to honor a commitment, and that's a good thing. That tells me that if they're coached later on down the road, they won't leave your company high and dry. What does it take for this candidate to do their best work? If they like a quiet space in your workplace is an open concept, is this candidate going to feel comfortable? Don't assume that your high potentials are highly engaged. In a study conducted by Harvard Business Review, 1 in 4 intends to leave your employment within the year. 1 in 3 admits to not putting all his effort into the job. 1 in 5 believes her personal aspirations are quite different from what the organization has planned for them. 4 out of 10 have little confidence in their coworkers and even less confidence in their senior team. Many of these employees set an incredibly high bar for their organization, precisely because they work harder and often better than their peers. They expect their company to treat them well by providing them with stimulating work, lots of recognition, compelling career paths, and the chance to prosper if the organization does. So when the organization is struggling, as most are these days, your star players are the first to be disappointed. Meanwhile, they're much more confident than their rank and file peers about their ability to find new jobs and are much less passive about researching other opportunities. As a result, when organizations cut back and ask employees to tough it out, the stars will be the first to say no thanks. I'd rather find an employer who appreciates the high level of contributions that I'm making. You must develop your high potentials if you're going to retain them. You may have a budget to pay for professional associations, certification, and national conferences. And if you do, that's great, because high potential employees thrive on having access to new and innovative information, networking, and industry leaders, and having access to the state-of-the-art technology. Think about other types of learning and employee development opportunities that you could offer beyond certifications and employee training programs. High potentials yearn for dynamic and ever-changing tasks. Is there an opportunity for an employee to be sent to another location for a period of time to learn? Is there a stretch assignment that they can lead? Can they have a dotted line reporting relationship to another leader in the organization so that they can learn? If your organization is large enough, it may be able to implement special tracks for high-performing employees. Maybe you can't afford to pay for associations and certifications, but you might be able to create a career ladder that rewards the employee when they seek education or certifications on their own. The key with this is to be fair and consistent, so criteria must be thorough and detailed and never subjective. Many organizations are coming up with talent management strategies that allow employees to touch many facets of the organization, from sales to marketing to customer service. For those employees who thrive on constantly learning, what better opportunity than to have assignments in all these different areas? Remember that if you implement something like this, the employee must be empowered to actively participate in the planning of their own career development. High potentials are usually looking for career growth. Work with them to stretch their goals that will move them out of their comfort zone. Add new responsibilities to their plate when they're ready for them, and talk explicitly about how they can continue to grow. For instance, when your fundraising director hits the $3 million annual goal that you've set, you may talk to them about setting a higher goal for the next 2 years and brainstorm together about how to achieve it. Of course, make sure that your high performer wants this. Not everyone is excited about increasing responsibility, and you don't want to push a high performer into something that feels like a burden. So know their preferences and ask if you're not sure. Talk with your high performer about how they will accomplish things in the next year and how they tie to the company's strategic plan. Make sure they understand how their work is and how it fits within the whole organization. For instance, you might talk with your regional director about how their project planning will be critical to your ability to expand into a new market and the potential for their job to grow and change with that. Too often, high potentials leave because they don't feel recognized or valued. So make sure they know how much you appreciate their contributions and talk explicitly about the impact their work has on your team or your company. This means more than the regular great job. It means being specific about why it was a great job. For instance, the way you intervened when the phone bankers were getting off message really impressed me. You got them back on track without decreasing their enthusiasm about their work. And I know that's hard to do. Instead of worrying about whether a high performer is happy in their role and planning to stay long term, you can simply ask directly, "You're crucial to our work. How can we make sure that you stay for the next 2 years?" You might do this over coffee or lunch or as part of a performance evaluation discussion. And even if you don't get a clear commitment, having an explicit discussion and showing that you care enough to be thinking about it can make a big impression that will factor into their thinking about their role with you. Because they have so much influence over their team, invest in your key managers strategically, because investing $1 in them will result in multiple dollars returned through their team. Help them understand that your performance review model is just that, a model. It has to be adapted to the point of view of the employee on the other side of the table. Show them that they can make that transition by connecting to the needs, attributes, and experiences of the employee. Managers' ability to tap into the intrinsic motivations that exist in their team members is crucial to create the climate of success. Daniel Pink argues in his best-selling book, Drive, that we are looking for 3 elements in our work environment. Number 1, autonomy. People want to have control over their work. Number 2, mastery. People want to get better at what they do. And number 3, purpose. People want to be part of something that is bigger than they are. These elements all relate to individual engagement and all tap into psychological needs we have as human beings. The more managers that can bring these elements to life for their team and through their high performers, the more of a climate of success will exist. It's easy to understand why most leave talent management to their line managers. They know their people best and have a very concrete view of their strengths and weaknesses. Most companies also recognize the economic benefit of delegating talent management to line leaders. When corporate and HR budgets are limited, it shifts the cost of development programs from the corporation into the budget of the business unit. That being said, it is a bad idea to delegate management of high potentials to line managers. These employees are a long-term corporate asset and must be managed accordingly. When you leave the task of identifying and cultivating tomorrow's leaders exclusively to the business unit, here's what tends to happen. Candidates are selected solely on the basis of recent performance. They are offered narrow development opportunities that are limited by the business unit scope of requirements and focus mostly on the skills required now rather than tomorrow. Talented employees can also be thwarted by line managers, collecting and protected and certainly not shared. Responsibility for high potentials development must be shared by senior leaders. Johnson & Johnson's LEAD program offers a great example of this approach. As part of Johnson & Johnson's organizational and talent review process, the company's managers select individuals they believe could run a business or bigger business in the next 3 years to participate in the program. The program lasts 9 months in total. During this time, participants receive advice and regular assessments from a series of coaches brought in from outside of the company. They also must develop a growth project, a new product, service, or business model intended to create value for their individual unit. Each candidate's progress in this regard is evaluated during a leadership session that is held in an emerging market such as China, India, or Brazil in order to increase participants' global knowledge. Graduates leave the program with a multi-year individual development plan that are periodically reviewed by a group of senior HR heads for further development and reassignment across the corporation. Pair your high potentials with effective mentors. In Homer's Odyssey, Mentor was the trusted advisor of Odysseus, who conveyed life-changing wisdom. Today, we commonly use that word to mean a more experienced person who can advise and teach us. Corporate environments have taken notice of this talent management concept and have started implementing more structured mentoring programs. These can be a very powerful tool in assimilating employees to your culture and values. Mentoring can be highly effective for retaining high-performing employees who thrive on interaction with influential colleagues. The difficulty lies in finding that perfect match between a seasoned employee with the willingness and openness to mentor someone and a high-potential employee who respects that mentor and is eager to incorporate their knowledge. But when that is achieved, it can be a great employee retention approach. So my final thought for you, and this is something that I've said throughout my career to employers that I've worked with, is hire for character and then train them. If you hire people that fit your culture and have the character that you desire, you can always train them on the more technical aspects of the job. A good manager is usually that, a good manager, depending on whatever department they're managing. They can learn that department, but they can't learn the skills needed to be an effective leader. And you certainly cannot learn honesty, respect, and other soft skills that you need to be a successful leader. So that leads me to the end of my presentation, and now we have some time to answer your questions. I'd love to hear them.
So Nicole, we do have one question. How do you recommend emphasizing diversity and inclusion during your recruitment techniques?
Well, that's a good question, and that's similar to some of the content that I gave you earlier, which is to include that in your conversations with the candidate. So if you're focused on a diversity and inclusion effort, then build that into the questions that you're going to be talking to your candidates about. Ask them how they've worked in an inclusive environment or promoted diversity in the workplace in their past, and that'll give you a better indicator of how they're going to bake that into their future position.
Okay. I think you did a really great job on your presentation today. We don't have any other questions that have come in from our audience, so that is a good indication that you gave them a lot of really relevant information that they were looking for. So at this point, we're going to thank our attendees for today's webinar presented by Heffernan. We will send information by email with instructions on how to access a copy of the presentation on our website. And thank you, Nicole Osborne, for your time and expertise today.
My pleasure.
We hope all of the attendees found today's webinar to be a valuable use of your time, and be sure to join us on January 26th for Office Ergonomics and Remote Workers. Thank you, everyone, and have a very safe day.